Hello, I'm Jerry Levine, General Counsel and Chief Evangelist here at ContractPod AI. Welcome to another session of our GC Masterclass series, today with VIA's Erin Abrams. Erin and I have known each other for some time, and I am proud to say that for the first time last week, I actually got to experience a transportation combination driven by VIA. I live here in Jersey City, and we've recently had VIA come here, but we're not here to talk about my experience riding in a purple-themed car. We're here to talk about Erin and what she can share about being a GC, being a legal leader, and what she does at her job and how she uses legal technology. So Erin, with that, please introduce yourself a little better than I did and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jerry. And I'm really glad that you had a chance to take one of our VIAs in Jersey City. Jersey City has been a huge success story for us, and especially throughout the pandemic, has really helped people get around their community. And one of the things I'm especially proud about the Jersey City project is it's one of the projects where we, along with the city, have done a very nice job measuring the impact of the service on both reducing carbon emissions, increasing sustainability, making the service more affordable for Jersey City residents, and then kind of helping people get to more jobs, schools, and hospitals, things that drive their quality of life. So I'm really glad you got to experience that. In terms of me, I've been at VIA almost 7 years now, so that's kind of a long time in startup years, but I've gotten to see the company all the way through from its very early days, like post Series A, all the way through now, in our global growth phase as we've expanded. And, I've seen the company through, several different phases of its business as well. So today we focus on transit technology, and we're one of the world leaders in the field of transit technology. So providing software as a service for on-demand mobility to private and public sector transit partners. So we provide our software solution to universities, hospitals, corporate campuses, municipalities, basically anyone who has a need to move people or things from point A to point B. We've also really expanded into logistics recently. And although you might be more familiar with us from our consumer service, especially if you live in the New York area, really the driving engine of VIA's growth today and into the future is that transit tech software. And we can operate that, in a variety of modes, sort of somewhat, vehicle and platform agnostic. So we can operate that, in urban areas with dense populations, in rural areas over long distances, and in a variety of verticals too. So we can operate that platform for school buses. And we've actually had great growth in the school bus segment for non-emergency medical transport, for paratransit and helping people with disabilities get around. As well as the more traditional on-demand and micro-mobility use cases that you might be more familiar with.
Fascinating. I'm surprised because, being here in the New York Metro, a lot of what I saw from VIA was, okay, some of my employees are taking VIA vans, or they're taking, obviously I'm here in Jersey City, so I see the cars go by. But, it sounds like you're almost a SaaS company that more, is that a good way to put it?
Yeah,
that you're really a software provider.
Yeah, we're definitely a SaaS company. We're SaaS first. The transit tech platform runs on SaaS, and that is really the core of our business. We also are able to build on the SaaS platform and provide transit operations. So the SaaS platform is at the core, but then we're able to offer certain services. So we can contract with the vehicle providers. We can, contract with drivers. We can bring customer support operations. We can bring insurance. We can bring the regulatory and the licensing framework, and pretty much everything that a city needs to operate a turnkey on-demand public transit system we can bring, but at the core of all of that is our SaaS product. And we license that globally now in like 230 cities and countries around the world.
That's really amazing. I didn't, even though I've been to the website and we talk sometimes and we go back and forth, I didn't realize quite how that worked. So now you said 7 years ago, you started right after the Series A, you got in at the ground floor. You've been there now for 7 years, which in turn, as you mentioned, does seem like a lifetime for a startup of any size. You were started there alone, right? What has the growth journey for you and for your team been like?
Yeah, so I was a solo lawyer for my first couple of years at VIA, and I did many other tasks at the company that really had nothing to do with being a lawyer. Anything from, being the original provider of our driver-facing support in Spanish, not even a native speaker of Spanish, just muddle along the best I can. But when you're at an early stage startup, everyone does everything, and that was part of the charm and part of the excitement for me. Like coming from a big law firm and then a big bank to go to an early stage startup, a company that I really passionately believed in the product, truly believed that it was going to change the world. And I liked the idea of kind of getting out there and going to cocktail parties and seeing my friends. And instead of telling them, hey, I work in compliance at a bank, and then having them go and refill their half full drinks at the bar because they just didn't want to hear any more about that, being able to talk to them about the product that I was bringing into the world that I felt really proud of. And so in the early days, I just kind of did a little bit of everything, mostly focused on contracts and our business partners, and looking at the risks around operating a TNC business, and then in New York City, a black car transportation business, when we first had the consumer service. But then, as I've been at the company and the company has grown up alongside me, really thinking about expanding the legal team for the business that not only we have today, but the business I think we'll have in the future. So because we have moved really into being a SaaS company, we now have a very large commercial team. So my colleague, Megan Manfred, is the head of commercial legal, and she has several lawyers working under her management who oversee the negotiation of these complex commercial contracts. We try to have them on our paper as much as possible, and we have a great SaaS form for them. But because we go through public sector municipal procurements, we have to review very detailed RFPs, and then we often have to negotiate on our counterparty's paper, whether they're a municipality, they might have specific contractual requirements for their municipality. And so it's a contracts heavy business, and we try to make it, as productized as possible and negotiate on our paper when we can. But sometimes the nature of the product or the nature of the customer requires a really bespoke contract negotiation. So building out that side of the legal team, that's been one of my challenges. Another is just looking at the different regulatory and legal risks that we face. So my other colleague, Ayana Free, she's the head of our litigation and regulatory compliance arm. And so we have to evaluate all of the different risk factors, as we go into different markets. So not just the software risks, but also, what kind of license is necessary if we're going to operate a transportation business. If it's software only, like looking at cyber risks and cybersecurity. So I've really built out that risk team as well. And they look at a variety of different litigation related and compliance challenges.
So I know I sent you a list of questions, but I'm actually going to switch two of them. One of the things you and I have talked about previously, it was you started out like I did as a litigator. How has that, today you're a GC running a full legal team. How has that helped you? How has that experience as a litigator shaped the way you run the team, the way you interact with your peers, and I guess the rest of the company, the other members of the leadership team?
Yeah, for sure. So I think sometimes litigators get sort of like a bad rap as potential generalists or future GCs. I think a lot of times early stage companies look for a corporate lawyer. If they're only going to hire one lawyer, they think that the traditional wisdom is that a corporate lawyer, has the most generalist experience. And I actually would beg to differ. I think litigators make great GCs. I might be biased, but I have several other of our tech GC peers, who I've discussed this with, like, Jonathan Trupman at Casper and Michal Rosen at Noom. Like, those are two other GCs that are former litigators. And three of us were on a panel and we talked about this. But I think, the consensus is that a GC who is a former litigator, you can kind of morph yourself into what I term a professional risk mitigator. So you see those same risks, you identify them as areas of vagueness, or contractual agreements that are not specifically spelled out, and you can spot those risks and kind of see around corners and anticipate future areas where you're going to have conflict, and if it's not appropriately addressed or remedied, could lead you down the path of litigation. And you can kind of go back in your litigator time machine to the beginning of the deal, where as litigators, we're not usually invited to the beginning of the deal, we show up much later. But as a GC, you get to be there at the beginning of the deal and say, with my litigator hat on, how would I do this differently at the outset? And then you can do it that way, which I think drives really great results for companies.
So now we'll go to something that I know you've spoken a lot about, diversity in your legal team. This has come up everywhere. Everybody's trying to figure out how they can diversify their legal team, work with more diverse outside counsel. I know that was a key focal point for you in building out your team. Has that, how have you found that impacts how your legal team works, but also for the bigger business?
Yeah, so diversity is extremely important to us at VIA in general, and then for me on the legal team specifically. And I'm really proud that our legal team is extremely diverse today. And I think that is one thing I've realized about diversity recruiting is that sort of diversity drives diversity. And so when you already have, diverse people on your legal team from a racial, ethnic, LGBTQ, gender perspective, then other people who you are trying to recruit for new roles, when they interview with your team, they see people who look like themselves, and that diverse image and diverse culture is reflected back to them, and they can truly see themselves as being a part of your organization, which I think sort of creates like a multiplier effect for diversity. And so one thing I've been really vocal about is not just only trying to recruit diverse people and super talented diverse people at VIA on the legal team, but also working with our outside counsel to diversify the lawyers who are staffed on our matters as well. So about a year ago, I sent out a letter to all of our outside legal providers emphasizing the importance of diversity and inclusion to us at VIA, and asking them to provide us with some data on not only how their law firms approach diversity and inclusion, but also how our matters specifically are staffed. So now we're working on coming up with a program, really mostly of incentives to reward the outside counsel that we think has done the best job staffing our matters with the kind of diverse team members that we think appropriately reflect our business.
Wow, that's so cool. Now we'll get on to what I like to talk about for a second, which is legal technology in general. And so what's the favorite piece of tech? So I guess let me start with the more wide question. What is VIA using right now in terms of legal technology, or technology that you're, that we could call technology, but when we say legal technology, what's the legal team working with? Everybody, sales teams often work with Salesforce, and that, what have you found has impacted the way your team works and the way you've really been able to assist the company, and how have you found that to go?
Yeah, so I think when I started out as a baby GC, we didn't have any legal technology, and we did everything sort of on a DIY basis, and using Excel spreadsheets and kind of keeping track of things in a fairly analog way. And since I've been with the company over the last 7 years, we really have expanded our use of legal technology in I think a fairly strategic way, and just kind of every 6 months or every year thinking about right sizing the business, and what exactly do we need today, what do we need for the next 6 months, not just going in for everything all at once, but at each stage of our growth saying is there one specific tool or one feature or add-on that could really help us get to the next level. So our sales team does use Salesforce. It was very important that we have tools that integrate with Salesforce. And I would say the two major types of legal technology that we use today, one, we have a legal billing system where we can run all of our invoices through that system, and I can sort the line item bills and make sure that they conform to our billing guidelines, and have our billing guidelines integrated with our legal billing system. And that goes back to the point you raised earlier about diversity, because one of the ways that we can measure and track diversity is we have the information sort of hard-coded into our systems to make sure that not only is the law firm sort of representatively diverse, but that the diverse associates that we have met and encountered in pitch materials are actually the ones that are meaningfully billing time on our matters. And we can keep track of that through our legal billing system, which I think is really great.
I have read a lot about the law firms that are putting out brochures about diverse associates, diverse partners, and then you get the same 3 non-diverse associates billing every matter.
Yeah, that was the problem that I specifically wanted to solve, is that I wanted to make sure that we at VIA kind of recognize the importance of that mid-level to senior associate role on a matter, as that's really the critical time that you build your capabilities as a lawyer, that you bill a ton of hours, that you are able to start being client facing and show that you can manage or handle a client relationship on your own. And we wanted to make sure that the people who were billing the bulk of those kind of hours to our matters were representatively diverse, and keep track of that in a specific way. So that's what we've kind of sought to do with our program.
And this may be too early, and sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but this may be too early. Have you seen how long have you been running that program for, to see how the billing is going? And then part two of that question is, have you seen a real impact in terms of, are some of these associates folks who, may have mentioned, oh, I'm thinking about leaving, but because of this, I've just got named partner, or I'm now in a council role, and next year I'm going to be evaluated for partner. Are you seeing anything like that yet, or do you think it's still too early to tell?
I think it's still too early to tell, but I think before we implemented this system, we would see that kind of thing. We would see, really promising, diverse senior associates who worked on our matters, and maybe they wouldn't stay with the firm. And that would be something that where I had an opportunity to communicate that to the firm leadership, I would communicate it to them and say, we really value this person as a client. We support their candidacy for partner. If they choose not to stay and you're not effectively able to retain them, let's talk about why. But I felt like I was doing that sort of in hindsight. And this system enables me to look at that a little bit more in real time and then have those discussions with the relationship partner on our matter while they are still able to mentor and retain those really promising senior associates.
So you mentioned your billing system. What else is VIA using? What else have you found to help yourself out technology-wise?
Yeah, so the other thing that we have done also quite recently is onboard a CLM system, so that integrates with Salesforce, that integrates with DocuSign, so that we can catalog our contracts. And we really wanted to be able to do this so that we could track, for revenue recognition purposes. It's quite important that we can integrate with our finance team and have a really good sense of specific contractual clauses that impact how we recognize revenue and how we track renewals and expirations, so that we can make sure our sales team gets ahead of the renewal cycle, and then any sort of bespoke provisions, tracking limitations on liability, tracking how our IP is treated, tracking if there's any kind of liquidated damages in a contract, kind of keeping track of those, or we have specific service levels and service credits. So once we became a full-scale global SaaS business, we quickly realized, we're not going to be able to keep track of this manually or in spreadsheets, and Salesforce isn't designed for what we as lawyers need the tool to be designed for. So we started, integrating with a CLM system. I think the main takeaway that I would have is the system is only as good as what you put into it, which might sound super obvious, but I think I underestimated just how heavy of a lift it is to get all of your legacy contracts into a system like this, and upload everything and tag everything so that it can be fully functional. And I think that's a pretty heavy lift, and companies should not underestimate how much time and how much manpower that can take.
Yeah, we've obviously recognized that. That's a big portion for us, and we don't really talk about product much on these GC masterclasses, but one thing I will say is this is really something that we hear over and over again, is how much migration of legacy documents has to be something you've got to take into account. Do you have any other takeaways from the implementation that you can share, or is that the biggest one you can think of?
Yeah, I would say, at least, and I'm trying to be positive about this and not put a negative spin on it, but I think some companies can have a bit of a disconnect between the sales team and the product team in terms of what capabilities the product can actually deliver. And I think we've found this a couple of times, both in the legal billing side and in the CLM side, that there are certain features that are kind of represented as being in the pipeline, and the sales team is super excited about them, and they can even show you a demo of them. But when you actually get into using the product, those features are maybe in development, or they're not highly customizable for your use case. And so I would say for GCs that are exploring those kind of systems, you really want to press on that and probe, if this feature is in the pipeline, when will it be ready? What are some of the sort of, gating items that you have to being able to roll out this feature? If it's in beta, sort of, what are the problems that you might have, or can we get a discount, or even test this for free if it's in beta, anticipating that there might be some bugs, and that our feedback will be valuable to you, and we'll be sort of willing to overcome working with those sort of bugs or glitches in the system to get a nice high functioning product. Because I think we have, in a couple of instances, kind of come out on the back end and found that those features, while they were sort of very heavily advertised at the early stage, at the sales stage, were not really as ready for prime time as we had hoped after implementation.
I think that's a really good point. And for anybody who's watching this and wondering about that, there are things that you can do. I love making my sales team work harder and work better, but to the extent that you do that, make sure you're asking about the roadmap. Ask about what you plan on doing, what your actual use cases are. Don't be afraid when you're talking to a salesperson. So, Erin,
like you can
on.
ask people, in the sales context, like you can say, like, please run this with not just a dummy set of data that it works on. Like, here's, sign an NDA, here's some of our contracts, here's a set of our data. Can you show us a demo using our data? And it might look quite different than the like super sanitized scrub data set that they know works every time in a demo.
Yeah, I know that personally. I demo in my live system here, which I keep getting told by our marketing team to stop doing, but ultimately I show people how I work when I get on a call with a client or prospective customer. One of the things I always do is say, this is my actual live system. None of this is dummy data. You're actually seeing me make mistakes or doing amazing things in real time. So, Erin,
I would say,
go ahead. Sorry.
Like a last sort of general tip about these systems is we have an outstanding legal ops team at VIA, and like I can't say enough good things about legal ops. So now we have 3 people who are on the legal operations, 4 people actually, if you count in the UK. So 4 people who are legal ops, and they're generally non-lawyers, super high-tech paralegals, but people who have a very sophisticated understanding not only of legal concepts but also of legal technology and the systems that help in-house legal departments run. And so first of all, love legal ops as a discipline, but second, I think one of the ways which we have found making legal technology effective is for each piece of legal technology or system, we have one legal ops associate who becomes sort of the champion of that system. And their role as the champion goes beyond being an administrator of that system. Of course, they know how to use it and can train other people internally on that system, but also they sort of become like an inside the company evangelist for that system and get other teams to plug in and interface with that system and troubleshoot and help them overcome issues with dealing with that system. So we don't always have to call, the vendor for support, because we have someone in-house who can provide very targeted support and understands the ins and outs of the system.
Well, that is incredible. I feel like that was my role at my prior job, and now I have a whole team of people here. But yeah, I think that's a really, really great idea for anybody who's thinking about that. Legal ops is becoming more and more important every day. I mean, how many different organizations have sprung out? The Clock, the ACC. I'm sure TechGC is going to have one soon. They're all talking about the newness, but also the importance of legal operations. So, Erin, I guess today I will give you one last question, but it's really a doozy, and I know it's a bigger one. You have often spoke about and really pushed the idea that the GC can't just be the company lawyer who sits in the background, but you have to have a seat at the executive table. You have to be strategic. What's the perspective there? How do you view that? Why do you say that? And what's the importance?
Yeah, so I absolutely think that it's essential for the GC to have a seat at the executive table, and furthermore, to have a voice and help represent certain issues or strategic perspectives of the company at the board level. And oftentimes the GC is the secretary to the board, as is the case with me. I'm the board secretary. But I think that role can be, a much more expansive role as a trusted advisor to the CEO and to the board as well. And I think that you do that, there's not really a shortcut to it. Over time, you have to build trust. But I think coming up with sort of creative paths and ways to do things that are aligned with the business imperative, understanding like what are the business goals, not just being, I think at a law firm, you're often trained to spot risks. Just like in law school, then the pipeline goes to the law firm and you're just, your job is to red flag things and spot risks. I think as a senior in-house leader, it's just not sufficient to spot risks and then wash your hands of them, because then someone else has to deal with those risks. So I think as a GC who has a seat at the executive table, like starting with spotting risks is like step one, but then you have to present things sort of as a fully formed idea of like, here's a risk, but here's a creative solution that mitigates that risk. And then take that next step, which really just relies on like common sense and business judgment, and layer that on top of your legal experience. And I think that's where you really start adding value as an executive.
So I guess the last thing I'd ask today is, are there any, we call them aha moments, but those eureka moments where you kind of just said, oh, I know what I can do better, or this is something that I've really had to change in the way I work, or are there any of those that you'd like to share today?
Yeah, I think I don't have any one like specific aha moment. I think the closest I can get to like an aha moment was really kind of seeing how our business was able to adapt so nimbly and so flexibly in the depths of COVID, and realize, when a lot of businesses were struggling and when, the consumer ride sharing business was itself struggling because, many markets banned shared rides and people were not leaving their houses, frankly, they're just not going too many places. And so a lot of people wondered, like, how will this impact Via? And I think because we had spent so many years sort of quietly laying the groundwork for our SaaS product, and making these connections to municipalities that have a really long sales cycle and a really long lead time, we were able to accelerate the transition of our business into all these new verticals that were so necessary. So helping, hospitals transport their essential workers, today helping people get to and from their vaccine appointments, raising the profile of our logistics product and acquiring another company to help grow through inorganic growth, the logistics products so that we could deliver food and groceries to vulnerable populations, and really continue to demonstrate the relevance of our product, in all these new ways. I think like laying the groundwork for that and making it, so that legal could solve those problems in real time and not just throw up a bunch of roadblocks. That to me was sort of a continuing series of aha moments and turning a crisis into what really became an opportunity.
Thank you so much, Erin. Is there anything else you want to share? Otherwise, I think I will let people know how to find out more about Via, find out a little more about you, and we'll end the session.
Sure, that sounds perfect. Thanks so much, Jerry. This was super fun.
Great. Again, thank you for joining us today for today's GC Masterclass. My guest was Erin Abrams of Via. You can learn more about Via at www.ridewithvia.com, www.ridewithvia.com. And thank you for joining me. Thank you, Erin, and thank you to everyone watching. Have a wonderful day.
Bye. Thanks, Jerry.